Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby, live around the world on the interwebs at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello and good morning to you. Oh, man, that 4-day weekend felt so good, didn't it? Man, it was like I needed that. It was a great weekend. Good time with family. We prowled the greenhouses. My wife was on the hunt for the perfect flower combo and just enjoyed some great time. Cooked out, had all the kids there, and it was fantastic. It was just a fantastic weekend. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And then Bill says, "Oh man, do we really have to come back to Brad? Really? That's how we have to start the week?" Yes, it's how we start the week. The weekly top three begins today because it is Tuesday, and Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets is joining us this morning, and we're ready to dive in. We're ready to dive in and get into the big three questions for today. And then in hour two, Chris Story is still on vacation, and I took 4 days. That guy. Anyway, we're going to dive into it, and we've got some other stories and some phone calls and stuff that we'll be doing in hour two, and maybe Nick Begich, but it's doubtful at this point. But let's, without further ado, let's get into this and bring Brad Keithley on board from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We haven't checked it out yet. Hopefully, all the audio and everything's working. Good morning, Brad. How are you, my friend? How are things going?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How about you?
You know, there are no complaints, my friend. It was a great weekend. It looks like you're traveling. How was your time?
My time was fine. I've got to run up to Seattle for some business stuff. I'm making it a 1-day trip, so I'm here today.
Round tripping it, huh? That's I've done that a few times where you run down to Seattle, you're there overnight, and then back, the day after that or whatever. It's always a challenge, but it's good to have you on board. All right, Brad. Well, I hope you had a great weekend, and if you're ready to dive in, I say that we should just get to crack-a-lackin'. Let's get started with the weekly top three. Talking to begin with about more subsidies and a potential special session ? During an election year. I mean, come on, that seems unusual. Give me the rundown here.
Well, Michael, the one leftover, it seems that the one leftover issue from the legislature that will not die is this proposal to subsidize consumers, utilities, producers, subsidize somebody in the Cook Inlet by substantially reducing royalties for Cook Inlet gas and Cook Inlet oil. By the end of the session, they were also reducing royalties for
I
Cook
saw that
Inlet
popped
oil.
up just out of nowhere. All of a sudden, it was Cook Inlet oil. I'm like, we haven't talked about this all. What?
Well, that's a cross subsidy. I mean, basically, what they're trying to do is there was a pushback to reducing gas royalties to zero. So I think they reduced them. The last provision I saw reduced them to like 3%, and then they threw in oil, and by reducing oil, since a lot of the Cook Inlet gas is produced in association with oil, or oil is produced in association with the gas, however you want to look at it. reducing the royalty on oil would also get money to the same producers that you're trying to encourage to develop more gas. And so it's really a cross subsidy from the oil side to the gas side. But I mean, Alaska families, Alaska revenues are taking a hit, even a greater hit, if you reduce the subsidies or reduce the royalties on oil as well. So it's just another effort to push money out of for the money to give back revenue over to producers or utilities or consumers, however you want to phrase this. That that proposal died at the end of the legislature. It got to Senate Finance. Senate Finance wasn't convinced it was something that the state ought to be doing, and so Senate Finance didn't forward it. Didn't get to the Senate floor. It wasn't otherwise called up in one of those stuffing bills that they did, and so it died at the end of the session. There are some who are pushing to revive it. John Sims, there's a headline, there's an article in the Alaska News Source, the Channel 2 news source. Headline is NSTAR President encourages special session to address natural gas shortfall. And Sims keeps pressing forward for that. And there's a little bit of indication that Dunleavy is paying attention to it. There's a headline again from Alaska News Source a couple of days later that says Dunleavy staff still working to understand what Cook Inlet gas development legislation will mean. And there's a piece in that story buried where it talks about Dunleavy isn't ruling out a special session, potentially may consider a special session. So there's some momentum for that. Sims is trying to shake the crisis tree and say it's a crisis. We need to address this crisis and get Dunleavy to do it. One more time. I mean, we've said this repeatedly. This is not something that John Sims doesn't have control over. If NSTAR doesn't have control over, if there is, if royalties really are the problem, if the additional economics that are factored into a producer's decision by having to pay royalties, if those really are a problem, what happens in other states, or what's happened in other states when that's a problem, is you add a royalty clause to your contract, and you say, "Look, I'll reimburse you for your royalties." The purchaser reimburses the producer for the royalties and takes the economic burden of that over onto the purchaser side. And the producer no longer has an issue with it because he's being reimbursed for the royalties. And so if that's really an issue, then Sims and the other utilities have the answer in their own control. They can write the XX royalty clause, offer to the producers, and if that's really what's holding the producers up, then the producers can accept that royalty clause, and the economics are taken care of. The fact this issue will not die, and the fact that people continue push for this royalty relief has made me suspicious all along. There's something else going on, that either there's something that producers see in this legislation that gives them an added incentive over and above royalty, or there's just some other consideration that's factored in here that hasn't been made public, that isn't transparent. But that's where we are. I mean, there is some consideration for don't kick the table. That's the lesson out of that, shaking. That's the lesson out of this, that they're still pressing for royalty relief. There's also the other piece of legislation that didn't get passed that was initially proposed as part of the Cook Inlet relief, was the state essentially buying a jackup rig, a rig that's usable in the waters of the Cook Inlet,
right?
And buying that and bringing it up and leasing it to producers. Essentially, the argument was, well, that's just a piece of infrastructure. It's like a road we put in, or it's like like any other piece of infrastructure that we put in. But that's not typically It's not typically something that the state takes on or any lessor takes on. It's an
Right.
obligation that's part of the producer's obligation to develop the leases. He has to get the equipment there to develop the leases. And again, it's a subsidy in the sense that the state would bring it up, state would pay for it and bring it up, and the producer would rent it. But there's not a particular great amount of clarity about whether the rental rates would be compensatory to the
I
cost
mean,
of the rig.
and why would that be the state's responsibility in those kind of situations? I mean, why would they have to? That's normally a producer's side. I mean, you keep saying that, that there seems to be something more to this. And I too, just in the periphery watching this, not understanding the full, I don't have an oil and gas background like you do, but even in watching the way that this just keeps coming back and keeps coming back, it seems like there is something more to this. Like there's something seen there, and they keep pushing on that crisis button over and over and over again. I mean, what is it? I mean, what in your opinion, what is it here that's causing this to not die?
I don't, John Hendricks is the producer that everybody says is going to benefit from this. Hendricks is the one that's got a field out there, the Kitchen Lights field, that he's been complaining about the royalties about forever, and saying that the royalties make the field uneconomic. And so everybody says, well, this bill is really for John Hendricks to go out and develop these leases. It may be that there's other producers out there that are sort of hiding behind the log, hiding behind the John Hendricks log, or hiding behind the we have a crisis log, and sitting there saying, if we can get this royalty provision through, oh baby, we're gonna do things now. There may be additional developments. There may be additional activity that they would undertake if the royalties released, and they're using Hendricks as sort of the front, and this crisis as sort of the front to cover that. I don't know, but there's not been a whole lot of transparency about it. And again, as I say, this is, if you take at face value what the producers have said, what NSTAR said, what DNR has said. DNR made this long presentation before House Finance at one point that showed how the royalty relief would economically benefit the producer. And my reaction to that was, well, you just proved my case. I mean, you just proved that if NSTAR, the utilities, would enter into the excess royalty clause, or enter into a royalty clause with the producers, you would cover the economics, and we'd be going down the road. But they keep bringing back the same argument, and I've never heard, honestly, I've never heard a rebuttal to the just enter into a royalty clause. I mean, the reaction is sort of, yeah, well, I guess we could do that, but it's yes, you could do that, and yes, you should do that, and yes, in other states which have had this issue, that's something that you should be doing,
Right.
or that's something that they normally do. And I just never heard anybody say, well, but we can't do it here because, well, you can do it here. I mean, I've
Is
written contracts here.
is it because they're trying to protect the ratepayers? Is the holy grail here that we want Alaska gas, but without having to pay more for it? Is that the magic bullet there?
Michael, but we would pay more for it. I mean, we would pay more for
Right.
it in terms of reduced royalty and in terms of
Right.
increased PFD cuts as a
Hidden
consequence
costs.
of
The
that
difference
reduced.
But the difference between hidden costs and on the table costs, right? Because if the
Yeah.
ratepayers had, I mean, I agree that I think that's what it is, but is that the holy grail of this whole thing? Is ratepayers shouldn't have to pay anything else? It should be a hidden cost to the state in other ways?
It could be. There's another piece of this, maybe. If you factor in the royalty costs, if you include the royalty costs in your purchase price, all of a sudden Cook Inlet gas becomes more expensive. According to the last year's utility study and the analysis of the various options, all of a sudden Cook Inlet gas becomes more expensive than LNG. It starts ramping up on that scale to the point where LNG becomes a cheaper, and obviously cheaper option. So maybe part of this is, look, we know we don't want to disclose how costly Cook Inlet is, because then you're going to tell us, well, it's more economic, as I've been saying. then you're going to tell us it's more economic to bring in LNG. So if we can hide a portion of these costs, we can continue with this fiction that Cook Inlet is cheaper and the costs will jump if we have to bring in imported LNG. Well, the costs are, I mean, basically what they're admitting is the costs are going to jump either way. The costs are either going to jump by somebody paying for the royalty, either the purchasers or the Alaskans through PFD cuts. Somebody's going to pay for that. They just want to hide who's paying for it so it doesn't look as bad compared to LNG.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're going to continue on this track of oil and gas. West Shell is up as a next segment for number 2 of the weekly top 3. We'll get Brad's take on what's going on there, what that decision means for Alaska. That's all coming up in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley is our guest. Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Oh, man. I keep looking at this and I keep going back. You know, prior to the session starting, Brad, this is what really kind of got my attention on this to begin with, is that prior to the session starting, you really hadn't heard there'd been a little bit of whispering about the gas, decline in the Cook Inlet and everything else. And I think there'd been a story in the ADN about potential down the road kind of thing. But all of a sudden it was on the radar, and it was one of the top 3 things that the legislature had to talk about was this energy thing. And then in the end, very little really happened on it, but they keep priming the crisis button to try and get people off the mark. And it starts to wear thin. It starts to feel a little bit like, the sky is falling kind of thing. The boy who cried wolf at some point along the lines. And it starts making you ask the question about who's benefiting in that, is this really about the people or is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, what really sort of triggered this session's focus on it, I think, is last winter's, again, crisis when NSTAR lost a couple of wells in its storage field and lost the deliverability out of those storage fields. And at the same time as we were having, a cold wave come through South Central. And so things got a little close. There were additional things they could have done. MEA, I think it's MEA, has the Eklutna power plant that they built that's dual fired. You can convert that to diesel and take it off gas for a while. And there's other things they could have done. And so it wasn't really that close, but it was close, sort of in normal working conditions, it was close. And so that's what they used as sort of the trigger into, well, we got to do something. We got to do something. And in this state, we discussed this last time, in this state, when somebody starts saying, we got to do something, the immediate reaction is, oh, we'll go to the legislature and get it done. If it involves money, we'll go to the legislature. If it involves, something else, we'll go to the legislature. That's our reaction to a crisis. That's not the reaction in other states. I mean, the other state is, oh shit, now we're going to have to pay more. We're going to have to include a royalty clause in our contracts to get the gas. But that's a normal commercial transaction.
Business as usual, right?
Yeah, and lawyers know how to write these things, and we put it in the contract, and we get the gas, and we go on down the road. And what you then have is a market test. I mean, you have commercial purchasers making the decision to include that clause or include a half royalty clause, half reimbursement clause, trying to negotiate and find where the market price is. You have that sort of test. Here, it's, oh my God, we got a crisis. We got to get the state to do something, and because the state is the mineral interest owner, the recipient of the royalty,
right?
Unlike in other states where you'd have to go to a bunch of royalty owners and deal with them. Although in Louisiana, the state is the royalty owner also for a lot of the gas down there. But unlike where you'd have to go to the mineral interest owners and deal with royalty clauses, here you just go to the state and get the state to relieve you. So it's we don't deal with things in the normal way. It's always the state's got to do this, or the state's got to do that, or we got to pour more money into it, or we got to the state's got to back down on revenue. Another good example is the child care tax credit that got passed this legislature. We're essentially going to pay companies in terms of reduced taxes for them to establish child care centers for their employees, or whatever universe of people that they're gonna offer it to. And we have a child care crisis. The state's got to do something. The state's got to pour more money into it. So we've decided to do it through tax credits, reducing revenue that way. Essentially, again, pushing it off on middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD.
The state is continuously the sugar daddy of everything. It's always the sugar daddy. They've got the money. They've got the thing. They're the royalty. They could do it all. It's continuous. I mean, that's the problem right now.
Yep, exactly right. And so you have, I mean, if you get the state on a roll, if you get the state sort of leaning, oh, well, maybe there is a crisis that I need to do something about, hold hearings, develop legislation. I guess you want to keep pushing for it. I mean, that's what Sims is doing. Is but I almost had him. Let's go.
Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke show.
Yeah, I'm a pain in the something or other. I mean, yes, absolutely. Welcome back. We're continuing now. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It is the weekly top three, the big three issues that Brad feels are important for us to be paying attention to in what's going on. And we continue. We just finished up with the big gas issue in the Cook Inlet and the potential for a special session. Now we get to Shell's West Harrison Bay. There was a decision on this. Shell has abandoned the North Slope, some North Slope leases, and it's raised some questions. And there's a decision there that Brad says has some implications. Brad, tell us what's going on here.
Well, Nat Hertz, who's an independent reporter now and gets published in a variety of journals and forums. Nat Hertz wrote a column recently, the headline of which, at least the version that showed up in the ADN, is Shell abandons North Slope oil leases, raising questions about the industry's future in Alaska. And what that's talking about is a collection of leases that Shell owned in an area known as West Harrison Bay. They're offshore leases inside a bay on the North Slope. The thinking is that they are good leases, potential oil play, potentially significant oil play. Geographically, they're located just north of Anwar and just north of NPRA and just north of Conoco's Willow development, and a little bit to the west of Oil Search's Santos's Pika development, both of which are major new plays on the North Slope. And there's some speculation that the West Harrison Bay leases cover acreage that would have a continuation of those plays that underlie the Willow play and the Pika project, and thus have a lot of potential. Shell bid on those in 2020, the same year they did the OCS drilling, the offshore drilling, whatever year that was. They're all run together now. Shell got those leases in West Harrison Bay, did a seismic evaluation, or has done an evaluation of what seismic information there is, and thought that they had a good play there. But they didn't want to develop them themselves. They, having been burned with the offshore development in Alaska, they didn't want to go forward with it themselves. So they were trying to sell out a portion of that, keep a portion for themselves, but sell out a portion and get somebody else to develop those leases, somebody else to take the heat, if you will, for developing leases in the Arctic, developing oil in the Arctic. And they were unable to find anybody. Along the way, The way you hold leases on the North Slope, the way you hold leases in Alaska is you unitize them. Typically, you have to develop. I mean, the language in the lease is you have to develop a lease within a certain period of time, or the lease expires. You have to relinquish the lease, or various provisions take control. In Alaska, we've developed this concept of unitization, which is a much different concept of unitization than there is in the lower 48. But we've developed this concept of unitization where you can pull a bunch of leases together and hold them all together based upon activity on any one lease. And Shell had unitized all these leases that it had gotten in West Harrison Bay in order to hold them and in order to market them as a unitized whole to other purchasers or other potential players. But Shell said no one stepped forward, but Shell had continued to hold on to the leases, trying to achieve some value out of them. Finally, with some pressure put on by another producer, Shell, the Department of Natural Resources, sort of put Shell to the test and said, you need to do something with this stuff. You either need to find the third party, or you need to develop it yourself, or you need to relinquish them, give them back to the state. And what Nat's reporting is on is Shell's decision to give them back to the state. Nat's blown that up a little bit and said, it raises questions about the industry's future in Alaska. The story basically is that these were very valuable leases. Shell didn't want to develop them because of the optics of developing in the Arctic. Couldn't get anybody else to participate to develop them because of the optics in the Arctic, and had to give them back. And so Nat sort of spins that into, is this the death of the future oil industry in the state, because you can't find anybody who's willing to develop Arctic leases. I think that overstates the case. Conoco has pressed forward on the Willow project. It had ample opportunity to bail on that project and to say, look, the requirements the hoops we're having to jump through at the federal level are just too much. We're going to give this up and relinquish the leases back. They had ample opportunity to do that. They haven't done it. Santos, the Pica leases, didn't get developed for a long time. Armstrong had them, was trying to market them, finally found First Oil Search, and now Oil Search has been acquired by Santos to proceed forward them, and they're proceeding forward on the Pica project. What this may say is what we really knew when BP left, which is major super oil companies, international global oil companies, really aren't interested in being in Alaska anymore and developing Alaska resources anymore. But that doesn't mean everybody isn't. Conoco's still in here. Pica, Oil Search, Santos is still in here. What it may say is that you're not going to get super majors in here, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get others in here. And it also may say that if you have to develop it in water on the North Slope, because that involves a bunch more federal regulations, that people and also you have to build underground pipelines, and also you get whaling implications up there. It may say if you have to develop it in water, that you're likely not going to go forward ahead. But I think what Willow and Pica is saying is, yes, there is a future for the Alaska oil industry. We're seeing two major projects being developed. I think if there are other finds on land, in particularly on state lands, but Conoco has sort of proven that even if it's on federal lands, an MPRA, I think you'll see people proceed forward with those. I don't think it's the death knell that Nat's article tries to imply it may be. But it could be telling, and it's probably telling us that, the super majors really don't want to be here.
Right.
That BP's gone, that Shell's gone. We're not going to see Exxon, who still owns an interest in Point Thompson, but's backed off being the operator. They've given that operatorship to Hillcorp. We won't see the super majors in here, and we may not see water projects in here, but I don't think it's the death knell of the industry entirely.
Well, and I think we've seen that for a while, where the majors have backed off, and it's the minor players that have come in and have swooped in to try and take up and pick up some of those pieces. I think Nat's his opener in this piece is interesting because he does kind of highlight some of the optics of what maybe somebody from the outside of the state would be saying. He said the project in the Arctic is an undeveloped region of Alaska's North Slope, and while it's not in deep water, it's a slight distance offshore, which means drilling risks provoking lawsuits and permitting challenges from conservation, read environmental groups, protests from local whaling captains, maybe even disruptions from climate activists at your next shareholder meeting. You call all the heads of other multinational oil companies that you sometimes work with to see if any of them want to buy a stake in the project, but they all balk. So you take a pass, you hand it back to the state, what could ultimately be a highly valuable lease. You'll take your chances drilling somewhere else, probably in a region where you expect to be able to get the oil to market sooner before there's too much risk of declining global oil demand amid adoption of new renewables. And so he's kind of painting the picture that we've seen. And really, this is kind of the picture that the environmentalists have been pushing for all across the country, right? To make it so onerous in Alaska, to make it so fraught with PR nightmares that nobody wants to loan money for projects or do anything else. So in that case, they're winning, but the miners are still willing to take that challenge. I mean, picketing a shareholder meeting at Shell is different than picketing a shareholder meeting at, Joe Bob's Oil Emporium, who's just a small little guy who is, maybe even a private company trying to do their thing, right? I mean, it's not the same thing. And so it's just a changing of the weather pattern rather than a full-on change.
Yeah, I mean, he does make a good point that Arctic development, especially offshore development, would be expensive. Shell spent $7 billion ultimately drilling only one well out offshore Western Alaska, out in the OCS, Outer Continental Shelf in Western Alaska. $7 billion, a lot of money, especially for one well, especially when the well doesn't prove your concept and you sort of abandon the entire project. So, Joe Bob's oil company isn't going to have $7 billion laying around. But what Pika proves is a guy with a good concept, in that case, Armstrong, a guy with a good concept, that can prove his concept by drilling a few wells and attract outside investment, in his case, First Oil Search, and now Santos can attract, and Repsol. Repsol's a Spanish oil company. Sort of mid-major companies can attract them, and they'll bring in money and they'll bring in expertise and go forward with development. It'll be interesting to see what the bids are on Harrison Bay. There's a company that owns some adjacent leases to Harrison Bay, a company called Narwhal, that was set up. One of the employees one of the owners is a former Shell employee who was involved in West Harrison Bay. So he thinks there's a lot of potential there. There are some minor players out there that may bid on these leases, or we may have a mid-major come in and bid on these leases, and try to proceed forward with them. They're state leases, so there's not going to be federal issues involved in trying to develop these involved in the lease sale. So we may see some activity. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of activity we have on those. But just because the super majors are leaving, I don't think is the death knell. BP left, and while I wouldn't say Hillcorp is a great replacement in terms of exploration, you've still got Santos and Repsol and Armstrong in terms of Pika, and you still got Conoco pressing forward with Willow. So you've got mid to high mid majors that are still pressing forward on these things.
Yeah, so what it is a fundamental change, right? It's a fundamental change of moving from a market that is mostly controlled or targeted by the majors to one that is now basically made up of small players more than anything else. So it's just a sea change more than a change in direction.
Yeah, and that's an important sea change. I mean, it's again because of the financial resources that the super majors bring, because of the frankly the scientific, their technological arms that sort of advance the ball. That's a significant change to lose the mid majors. But there's a difference between losing the super majors, super companies, and just going to zero. I don't think we're in that. I don't think we're in that drop. I think we've lost the super majors, which is what we knew when we lost BP, when BP packed up and left. But but that's just sort of dropped us down a tier. It's not dropped us down to the bottom. You know, nobody ever wants to lose super majors. Nobody ever wants to lose anybody from a market.
Right.
And it's not perfect, but I don't think we say, well, this is the end. And when we face the end, we have to go to the legislature, and legislature has to do things. So
Right.
I don't think we're at that point.
Right, because that was what we just discussed in number one of the weekly top three was, if there's a crisis, go to the legislature. They'll break out the checkbook. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. All right, well, that's what the West Harrison field tells us. It's not a crisis. It's just a change. We'll see what happens with that. Weekly top three continues. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The Michael Duke Show continues. We'll be back with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. I mean, he really does pump the emotional button, I guess, more than he's very good. Nat's a very good writer, and I do enjoy reading him, but welcome to Alaska's future, or really its present. I mean, this is after he sets it all up to talk about all this stuff. But I mean, really, this is what the environmentalists he says conservationists, but it's read environmentalists at this point. They don't want to conserve. They want to preserve it in a pristine, leave it in exactly the same state there, but this is what they were looking for. They were looking to basically hobble the whole industry and to, hog tie them so that nobody wanted to do anything in Alaska. If they go to China and do it, if they go to Indonesia and do it, if they go anywhere else and do it, fine, but not in America, not in Alaska. That seems to be the answer.
Well, and that they fundraise off on that, right? I mean, you have polar bears that are in commercials that, stop the oil industry and save polar bears, type of commercialization. That's how they, get money to pay their salaries and to keep going. That's sort of their money making enterprise. So yeah, but and Nat is a great writer, and this is a great way of presenting it. Presenting the issue in a way that sort of gets people's attention and gets people focused on whether there's something whether we are facing a death knell. But Willow and Pika, I think, are much better indicators, frankly, of Alaska's future than West Harrison Bay is. If the West Harrison Bay story isn't over. The leases have come back to the state. The state's going to run another lease sale with respect to what the leases out in West Harrison Bay. We'll see what kind of interest there is in it. I suspect the leases will get picked up, and I suspect that somebody will sort of start the project over in a way, develop their own information, and then they'll try to market it out to others, and we'll see whether there's another oil search out there, as there was for Armstrong Repsol that wants to come in and play and participate in it. But I don't think the story's over. You sort of have to go through the next round of lease sales and see what the reaction to that is, and see what happens beyond that before you even write off West Harrison Bay.
Right.
But again, I think Willow and Pika are much better indicators of where the industry in Alaska is headed than this particular situation.
Brad, I think, I seem to recall a while ago, maybe it was early on, I think we talked about when BP or maybe it was Exxon, I can't remember who was the first to pull out, but one of the majors was like, we're going to take our bat and ball and go home. And I was like, fine, take your bat and ball and go home. The resources are still here. And I said, maybe this will create, because remember, some of these companies, when they first got started in Alaska, they were minor players. they were not major players in the world on the world stage of oil and gas development, and it was through Alaska that helped them become world players. And so I said, fine, let the miners come in and build themselves up, and maybe they'll become major players by working with Alaska. And so to me, this is just kind of a change of it's a change of players more than anything else. They're not the majors with the gazillions of dollars in backing and everything else, but they also don't come with the baggage of being afraid that somebody's going to, picket their shareholder meeting at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it is a change. And we have seen that with BP. BP was the first to pull the chain, and then Exxon sort of stepped back from the operator role over at Point Thompson. But we've seen, the super majors saying, yeah, our time here is done. We've done what we're going to do. We've gotten the benefit that we're going to get, and our time here is done. And we had Hillcorp come in, not the world's greatest explorationist, certainly, but come in and continue to develop and sort of continue to refine Prudhoe Bay. There's lots of oil left in Prudhoe Bay, and continue to find ways to scrape the rocks in Prudhoe Bay. And we've seen Armstrong attract Repsol and attract Oil Search into the Pikka project, and we've seen Conoco press ahead with the Willow project. So it's not. I mean, it may be one step back, but it's sort of two steps forward in terms of Willow and Pikka. 2 steps forward and then a step back, and then maybe another step forward. So it's not all progressing,
right,
apace. There are challenges up here, but Pikka and Willow demonstrate that you can overcome those challenges.
Right. I just don't think it's the doom and gloom that Nat is saying here. Like, this is the end of an era. Maybe it's the end of the era of majors being the big, the major contributors here. But I think it just offers opportunities for the miners to come in here. And like you said, they're saying promote the fear in the chat room. Fear sells. And that's what I think it is. It's the fear of that point. Same thing with the oil and gas thing. It's the fear, right? The crisis. They keep mashing the crisis button. What happens when you keep giving the rats dopamine? That's what happens. All right, here we go. We're jumping back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Not your daddy's talk radio. That's right. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We continue. Brad Keithley is our guest. Alaskans for Sustainable Budget. You can find them at ak4sb.com. He's on Twitter. He'd love to fight with you on Twitter at any time. Facebook. He's got the weekly column in the Alaska Landmine and everything else. The weekly top 3 continues. Now down to number 3, which is, hey, where's the phase 2 utility report on the Southcentral Gas? I mean, this was coming out, right? I mean, we were just talking about mashing the crisis button over and over and over again. Oh, it's a crisis, gas in the inlet. And there was supposed to be a secondary report that gave more information, just like there was supposed to be a secondary report on the defined benefits thing. And of course, it never really kind of showed up. And maybe it did, and it's sitting in a drawer somewhere because it doesn't tell you exactly what they want to hear. Brad, where is the phase 2 report? What's going on here?
I don't know where the phase 2 report is, Michael. I wish I did. So this sort of loops back to the first issue, the Cook Inlet issue. Last year, the utilities financed and gave a lot of press, a lot of publicity around a report done by some consultants on what the alternatives were for dealing with the Cook Inlet. They actually started it back when shortly after Hillcorp announced that it wasn't going to extend contracts for Cook Inlet gas, that they didn't see the economics to continue to develop their interests in the Cook Inlet. So they were going to sort of ramp down by closing out contracts in the Cook Inlet. The utilities got together and set up this study group that hired consultants and went in and had them look at Cook Inlet alternatives. And they did a great job. The consultants did a great job at looking at the alternatives. They developed the economics of what those alternatives were. compared them to each other, sort of ranked the choices, and produced this report last July that frankly is a great data tool to analyze what's going on in the Cook Inlet. But they called it the Phase 1 report, and they said there's going to be a Phase 2 report, and the target date for the Phase 2 report was the end of 2023 to make a decision on long-term options, which long-term option they were going to pursue, or which multiple short-term options they were going to pursue, and then kick off sort of the implementation phase of getting whatever solution they found in place. And one of the recommendations was to focus in on LNG and see that imported LNG was viable, that the economics are accurate about it, and let's come together, and then because it's going to take a while to get the LNG facilities in place, let's go forward and do that. The Phase 2 report's never shown up. I mean, I keep asking about it and keep getting sort of, it's out there, but it's never shown up, and it's never been presented in public. If it's done, it's never been presented in public. The options have never been talked about, and so we really don't know what it says about the way forward. We know what people wanted to do in the legislature. They wanted to prolong the Cook Inlet by subsidizing Cook Inlet producers or purchasers or whoever they were subsidizing, but they never came out with this additional analysis they were supposed to be doing about the relative merits of the various solutions. They just sort of honed in on, we're going to subsidize the Cook Inlet and that's our solution, without sort of more fully developing the LNG option. It's not that the LNG option isn't out there. I mean, Marathon bought the old Conoco export plant. We used to export LNG out of the Cook Inlet. We had surplus gas in the Cook Inlet, and in the 1970s, I think it was, we built, or maybe the 1960s, Conoco built, Phillips at the time, Conoco at the time, anyway, Phillips at the time, built the Cook Inlet Kenai LNG export plant, and exported up until 2010, I think it was, and had it going. And you can't automatically use an LNG export plant for imports. You have to sort of reverse the equipment in a way, or put in new equipment to be able to do imports. But they had the pier, they had the sort of a lot of the parts in place. They had the pipelines feeding it that could be reversed to take gas away. They sort of had the kit there, and they didn't tear it down. They mothballed it. Conoco mothballed it when they stopped exporting LNG. Marathon bought it from them because prices in the Cook Inlet got so high at one point. Gas prices in the Cook Inlet got so high relative to LNG prices that Marathon thought they were going to be able to make money by buying the facility and import gas into for use at the Marathon refinery, the old Tesoro refinery down on the Kenai. So they bought it, and they've had it. They've even got it FERC certificated to import LNG. I mean, they've got all of the permits that they need to be able to go forward and make the design switch to make it an import facility for their own use. They'd have to go back. Excuse me. They'd have to go back and amend that FERC certificate to make it available to import LNG that they would then sell to third parties. But they've got a lot of that work done. So it's not like we don't know that there's an LNG facility around that could be used for meeting the objective, but the reports never come out. So I mean, that's part of what adds to my suspicions about what's going on with respect, if there's another agenda going on with what is being pursued in the legislature on the Cook Inlet. Give us, if that's the best option, if subsidizing producers in the Cook Inlet is somehow the best option for Alaska, go ahead and publish the report, or finish the report if you haven't finished it, and give us the range of options, give us the information on the range of options. But they haven't done it. So there's a question in my mind about, why do we not have that second report? In a presentation to the RCA a couple months ago, Chugach Electric the RCA had called up all the utilities, South Central utilities, and said, "What's your plan if we run short on gas?" And Chugach had come up and had made a presentation about, who it was going to curtail and all that sort of stuff. It was asked the question, well, what about additional supplies? Where's, LNG, the phase one report said LNG is a good prospect. When do you need to make a decision to go forward? And the guy from Chugach said, well, we at least need to make it. It was sort of like, we need to have made it yesterday, but we at least need to make it by the end of the second quarter of this year. Well, that's the end of June, and that's coming up fast. And if we don't even have the information published upon which to make that decision, it's problematic. So, Michael, this is another. Where's the report?
Right.
There's another piece that adds to my suspicion that there's another agenda going on with respect to what the utilities are trying to do and what the producers are trying to do with respect to the royalty relief.
Well,
in the Cook Inlet.
Yeah, anytime that they highlight, this report's coming and it's going to justify our position on anything. I mentioned the defined benefits thing earlier because they were doing a deeper report and whatever, and then that report mysteriously never surfaces or never comes forward or is talked about. It always raises my suspicion because then it doesn't. To me, it basically says, well, it doesn't justify your position. That's why you don't want to highlight the report. Same kind of thing. What you'll find probably in this report is that just like the defined benefits plan, where it was going to be more expensive than they ever said it was going to be, in this case, it probably justifies that importing LNG is still the best option. And that's not what they want to talk about. And I think that's probably the answer there. 90 seconds. Go ahead.
And there's other things. NSTAR has proposed a new pipeline to build a pipeline down to the Matsu port, and proposing to build an LNG plant there when we've got the Marathon plant already in existence, LNG plant already in existence. It's just there's not clarity about what the heck's going on behind the curtain, and people are pursuing, I think, different agendas for different reasons, non-transparent reasons. That makes me really suspicious about why we need to be continuing to pursue this legislation on the Cook Inlet.
All right, Brad, final thoughts as we come into the election season. What are you watching? Give it to me here in about 30 seconds.
Saturday, 5 p.m. is the filing date. We don't have all the candidates in yet. There may be some surprises yet. There was an article in the ADN that said there's a lot of incumbents that still don't have opponents. Maybe that will change by Saturday. But next week, we're going to be talking about who's running and what does that mean for the coming legislature?
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's a little disheartening to see a lot of empty slots right now. There's not much time, so we got to get into that. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board. As always, it's good to talk with you.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Hour 2 is dead ahead. Your phone calls, discussions, and flags over Denali. Or lack of flags over Denali, I guess I should say. Yeah, Brad, I mean, it really, right. Fear sells. They're all saying it. Brian says it in the chat room, and Terry's saying it and everything else. This is a big question. Now, Brian asked, who owns the report? The second phase reports. Is it the utilities that are reporting it?
Yeah, the utilities have paid for it, so they own it. But here's the RCA, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, which has jurisdiction over the utilities and has the obligation to monitor them and regulate them with respect to their obligation to serve. I mean, utilities have the obligation. Utilities have a certificated service area. They have an obligation to serve that service area. They are responsible for coming up with the supplies and building the kit necessary to serve that area. So the utilities have the obligation to go out and get the gas. The RCA has the obligation to monitor and to regulate and to push them to make certain they have the gas supplies. Last year, when the phase one report was presented, it was presented in front of the RCA. Big fanfare, big presentation, slide decks. The consultants came, the utilities came. Everybody talked to it, and they talked about there'd be a phase two report as they narrowed down the options and started into the implementation phase. Well, the RCA has called up all the utilities to talk to them about what their plans are in the event of the shortage. but I've not seen the RCA press forward on where's the phase 2 report. You said you were going to give us the phase 2 report. You said you were
Right.
going to narrow down the options. Where's the phase 2 report? So the question is not only to the utilities, excuse me, about where's the phase 2 report, but the question also is to the RCA, why aren't you pressing forward on the phase 2
Right.
report? Why aren't
And
you pressing utilities to present it?
Yeah, why aren't you asking? Why aren't you asking for that report? I mean, if they highlighted it, says, "Oh, there's more to come," why aren't they giving you that more? Is it because it doesn't bolster their position? I mean, inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, that's the suspicion. That's the suspicion is in the absence of information, about the LNG options, and in the absence of any understanding of defining those options better, then we're just going to press forward for this royalty relief in the Cook Inlet. And it's just there's not a transparency to this that makes me feel, and I'm somebody who's been around this issue for a heck of a long time. There's not a transparency to this issue that makes me feel like I understand what the story is and I understand why we need this legislation. It feels a lot more like somebody's going to do better. Somebody's going to do better dollar wise. Excuse me. Somebody's going to do better dollar wise with this legislation, and they don't want us to know all this other information because they're going to do better dollar wise. So let's get the legislation through. Not tell everybody the rest of the story. Let's get this legislation through and sneak it through. Claiming there's a crisis and we'll all be better off, and we'll sort of chuckle in the background about, wow, didn't we just pull off a great one?
We'll curl our mustaches, snidely whiplash in the background. Yeah, it's a little frustrating. We keep hearing that there's going to be more. Again, it was this. I keep going back to the defined benefits thing, but we keep hearing. We saw the reason people go up and say this is going to be a lot more expensive than you're saying. Oh, well, we've got cost. We'll pass it and then we'll figure it out, kind of thing. And it always makes me leery. I mean, it's like the report on the election stuff, right? From that Mike Shower was trying to get from the OMB for years. Still hasn't gotten the report. I mean, it just says why all the skullduggery, why all the cloak and dagger? It's because somebody's benefiting somewhere. I'll tell you that. That's the thing. These reports get buried because somebody is benefiting somewhere. I would just like to know where they're benefiting and who's benefiting from what.
Yeah, and this NSTAR feint that I was talking about earlier, mentioned earlier, NSTAR has proposed a new pipeline to run down to the Matsu port, the Kinnikarn port, $50 million pipeline, new pipeline, and that's just to get to the pipeline to the port. Then they have to build the LNG import facility at the port. So we're talking about multiples of additional costs, and that's coming out about the NSTAR's making this feint at the same time as they're making the push for the Cook Inlet royalty relief. When the Marathon plant's sitting right there,
exactly, it's there, it's
the existing dock, and a FERC certificate to go ahead and at least the initial FERC certificate to go ahead and proceed forward. So there's just facts that are just wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say there's a crisis and NSTAR makes this feint, this $50 million feint, they're just wrong.
Right.
There's something else going on.
Yeah, I would like to know. Inquiring minds would like to know.
Well, I don't care if I know or not. I just don't want to pass royalty relief in the midst of all this.
Yeah.
And let somebody rip off the state, which is what royalty relief is. Let somebody rip off the state when we know that's not the right alternative, when we know there's cheaper alternatives for Alaska.
Yeah. And Brad, this whole election thing, I mean, everybody's so frustrated, and yet here we are a week away from the deadline, and the majority of legislators do not have a challenger. And that's a little disconcerting. Let me just say it that way. We're going to talk about it in an hour or two, but it's a little disconcerting to see that.
It looks like a setup, Michael, to be very honest. It looks like a setup for a coalition in the House. I mean, the lack of conservative challengers are sort of leaving the playing field in a way that makes you think that there's a setup for coalition in the House. So, yeah.
God help us all. God help us all. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
A safe trip home, my friend. All right, thank you so much, folks. We are out of time. We got more coming up. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. It is Tuesday. I had Monday up because, whoa, man, I thought it was Monday, but it's Tuesday. That's right. It's a 5-day. Best thing of a 3-day weekend is the 5-day work week. That's doesn't get much better than that. We're getting ready to go. Hour 2 of the program, and we've got lots of things to talk about today, including flags over Denali, or maybe no flags over Denali. We'll talk a little bit about ranked choice voting. We got this discussion on how many of these seats in the legislature are not up for, they have no challengers. It's only the incumbent. Brad just said something that I thought was very interesting over the top of the hour during the break that I think I'll bring back up here in just a second, and we can talk about that as well. But I'm also opening up the phone lines this morning at 319-527-3864, 319-527-3864. And I've got a line on hold already this morning. Carlene is calling in from Kodiak. So let's see what Carlene has to say this morning. Good morning, Carlene. What's on your mind, my dear?
Brad Keithley's talk. I'm hoping that the legislators are listening to what he had to say today, because that phase 2 report just is a whole bunch of big red flags flowing. And I've been reading a lot. Almost didn't wake up this morning, had to set the alarm clock. And I've been reading 637 reviews from a certain bank in Alaska. And then I got more sent in the mail about the attorneys generals. 15 of them have joined together. And so I think part of the crisis is in the banking industry, the dastardly things that they're doing. It's called debanking, but what they're actually doing is closing your accounts. And from the papers that I just got in the mail, Attorney General Knudsen demands answers from Wells Fargo for debanking practices. And then the same thing about Bank of America, and they're targeting oil industries, coal. It says right here, the Attorney General says right here that Biden's policies, he's not able to get executive orders on, he's not able to get past Congress. So the banking corporations are doing these things for him. And they're actually, by 2024, they're going after everybody: agriculture, aluminum, cement, coal, iron, commercial and residential real estate and transport. oil, gas, power, automotive, steel, aviation sectors.
And when you say debanking, Carlene, I mean you're talking about. I mean this is what we were discussing earlier, where there's been a tremendous amount of pressure from outside interest groups, environmentalists, et cetera, to basically pressure lenders to not loan money for projects that they don't agree with, like development of oil and gas on the North Slope or something else, right? I mean, is that what you're talking about in this debanking?
Debanking is another word for they close your account, and they're just not letting these people borrow money. My Native Corporation went from $100 million to $800 million in a short time because they borrowed money and they had money to play with and they didn't have to worry about anything. So it favored them. They did well by doing that. But now the banks are not doing that at all. They're actually even doing all kinds of things to people. I have 637 reviews right here, 400 pages that I've been reading. It's unscrupulous. I don't have the adjectives, Michael.
Right.
About this.
All right, Carlene. Well, I appreciate you sounding off this morning, and we'll have to take a look at we'll have to take a little deeper look at that. I appreciate you calling in. Thanks for listening this morning. I appreciate it. Let's continue on here. Another caller before we get to the stories that I want to cover this morning. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Mike. It's Craig in Fairbanks. How are you?
Hey, Craig. What's on your mind, my friend?
The Park Service.
The Park Service, yeah, that's a story.
The most arrogant agency we have in this country. Another example of it this weekend, where they pretended like they didn't tell that construction crew not to fly their flag. Then they had a carefully worded, lawyer-inspected letter that came out 72 hours after the thing started. You know, if it was true, why couldn't they have just denied it right away? Instead, they said nothing. They sat back. They lawyered up. Just ridiculous. It's the same type of arrogance that told John Sturgeon, go ahead and sue us. We've got a room full of attorneys. We've got to do something about this. Sullivan and Company, they've got to cut the budget on this agency. It's out of control. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
No, the story kind of picked up over the weekend. I wasn't paying attention. I kind of unplugged last week when I went on vacation. And when I came back, I was like, holy cow. There's like a gazillion stories. It made it all the way out to Libs of TikTok and everything else that's made national news, that here in Alaska, they're reticent to fly the flag in a national park. And I'm just like, at what point was this okay? At what point is this okay? And this just shows that it matters who you put in these positions, Craig. Can you hear me, Craig? Can you hear me, Craig?
Yeah, okay. I thought I lost you.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying. I was just saying, yeah. Who?
Cutting the budget's the only thing that's going to fix this. And like I said, the crew that went down there asked them to please put the flag up on the pole. They had taken it down the night before, like they do apparently every night because of the light issue. But then they couldn't find it. It was missing. They were embarrassed. They could not find the flag they put in the same box every night. I mean, that doesn't just scream motive and what they're thinking. I don't know. Anyway, I'll let you go, Mike. I just can't believe the arrogance of the Park Service.
All right. Well, thank you, Craig. I appreciate you calling in and sounding off on this. Yeah. So for those of you who missed it and didn't catch the story like me over the weekend because you weren't really paying attention, this all started because a construction crew who is building a bridge at the Pretty Rocks landslide area inside the park said that they were banned by the park superintendent from flying American flags on their vehicles because it degrades this is the quote, because it degrades the ambiance of the park experience for visitors. Somehow it offends some park visitors to see the American flag flying from vehicles in the park or something. The original story was in Must Read Alaska last week. on Thursday or Friday, and basically it said workers from Granite Construction said the Denali National Park Superintendent Brooke Merrill contacted a company foreman through an employee of the Federal Highway Administration, saying the Park Service has received complaints from someone driving through the park who reported that the 3 by 5 foot flags on the vehicles were detracting from their enjoyment. This was the thing. Now, remember, this is a Federal Highway Administration project. This is not a parks project. This is not a national parks project. This project is from the thing. But it was the vehicles that were transiting in and out of the work and construction area that were causing the problems. Senator Dan Sullivan sent a letter to the director of the National Park Service, Chuck Sams, expressing his strong disapproval to the demands that workers take the American flags off their truck and the heavy equipment. And Sullivan said that the matter was especially concerning that it came on the eve of Memorial Day weekend, which, again, yes, this is the time when we're supposed to be celebrating and remembering those who, sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice for these things. This is what Sullivan wrote in the letter. On the eve of Memorial Day weekend, a matter of very significant concern has come to my attention, and I'm requesting your immediate response. As you know, a major construction project is underway in Denali National Park and Preserve to build a bridge at mile 45 of the Park Road, also known as Pretty Rocks. One of the vehicles involved in the construction had a 3 by 5 foot American flag affixed to it while working on this project. For reasons that remain unclear, someone at the National Park Service caused the construction crew to remove the American flag from the vehicle. This is an outrage, particularly in the lead up to our most solemn national holiday, Memorial Day, a time when Americans come together to honor those who gave their lives in service to our nation while wearing our country's flag. The American flag, especially on Memorial Day weekend, should be celebrated, not censored by federal government employees. There's no federal regulation or law that I can conceive that would ban the flying of American flag on public land, particularly in a national park, the principal purpose of which is the enjoyment of American citizens. I request that you immediately investigate this incident to figure out exactly what transpired, including whether there was a requirement made by the NPS contract that prohibited the contractor's employees from flying the flag and the circumstances in which this incident was handled and by whom. I also request you outline what concrete steps, be they increased training, clearer guidelines, updated policies, that the NPS will take to ensure that an incident like this does not happen again in American national parks. It is absurd and defies all logic that a federal contractor working on a project which is funded by the American taxpayers in a national park the week before Memorial Day is prohibited from flying the American flag. I cannot conceive of a federal law or regulation that mandates this. So this is the letter. And then there were other letters that were drafted and put forward by Ben Carpenter, Kevin McCabe, and more. All right. So there were some legislators who got in on this that were like, what is going on? And this had a lot of people were really heated about this. So much so that a convoy was created in Fairbanks to travel down to the park and basically parade American flags into the park. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a moment. And we'll have the Park Service's response to this, which it is very interesting. It definitely walks the line on this stuff. We're gonna talk about that, and we will continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more in just a moment.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, I just can't believe this. This is like I came back from vacation and like this is what I mean, who in there? Well, I mean, I can tell you what part of the problem is, and we'll get into that here in just a, we'll figure it out. Dermot Cole, or whatever his name is, wrote a rebuttal calling Sullivan all Republicans liars. Of course he did. This is Dermot Cole. Have you been reading? I went out and found his new blog or his new news site, and woof, what a screed, man. That guy makes no bones about it. He just wants to, oof. Yeah. Let's see. It was nuts. I got looped a little from the BS that it wasn't true. These guys were quoted directly, says Herder. I mean, this whole this is just a whole, crazy. This whole thing is just stupidly crazy at this point. And Herder said, well, that was one of the rumors that was going around. Apparently the troopers were called as some were fearful of the flag-waving patriots. That's not exactly what happened. What happened was the troopers were called to sort out the traffic at the Walmart where they were debarking from. So it wasn't that the troopers were called out to stop them. They were called out. The official statement from the troopers is that the Park Service has not called them for backup. Troopers were on site at the Fairbanks Walmart where the convoy group gathered on Sunday. The troopers were called for traffic control at the entrance to the park. That's what they were, that's the thing. Not that they were afraid. Traffic control, because apparently, 100 people showing up is unusual at the park, apparently, or something. Oh man, it's crazy. This is madness at this point. This is kind of just straight up crazy stuff that this kind of stuff is going on. That this should even be an issue. Flying an American flag in a national park, whether or not it was at the park, was it at the construction site, whether it's on my vehicle, whatever, somebody's feelings were hurt. I mean, that's essentially what they were saying. It was detracting from somebody's park experience. Somebody's feelings were hurt. And so essentially they wanted you to take the flag down because somebody's feelings were hurt. Well, F you. I mean, seriously, if you can't take it, if you are so hurt, I'm offended by Subarus. Take them off the road. I'm offended by your Joe Biden sticker. Take it off the road. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's triggered. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. This is my favorite quote. I'll repeat it on the radio, but this is my favorite quote. In the Stampede area of the Denali Borough, a man who owns property next to Brooke Merrill, the park director, who owns property next to Merrill's home site and who shares a driveway with her, told Must Read Alaska that he lined the driveway with American flags on Friday so she can enjoy them as she comes and goes. It's like that's like troll level infinite at that point. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. All right, we're coming into it. We're coming into it here. Sorting out. No, it wasn't the sorting out. They were on hand at Walmart, and then they had also been called to sort out the direct traffic at the park entrance. So it's both, apparently. Apparently they didn't want to make sure these good old boys didn't. I don't know. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
The fact that the United States flag is controversial is maddening, says Ryan in the chat room. And I'm with you. I couldn't believe that this was actually a story, let alone that it had gotten the kind of traction that it had, that somebody would have the chutzpah and the gumption to say, you need to take that flag down because somebody's feelings were hurt. Essentially, that's what they're saying, right? This is taking away from somebody's experience or ambiance or whatever. I don't like the look of your face. Get your face out of here. It's taking away from my ambiance of the park. Does that mean that you can call the cops and have them hauled out? I don't like your bumper sticker because it says something that I don't like, whether for or against one candidate or another or whatever. I just don't like the cut of your jib. Get out of here. Somebody called and complained. Okay, Karen, I'm sorry that you're offended by the American flag on Memorial Day. Just wow. And then, of course, the rumors start flying, and then it becomes kind of an us versus them thing. So then there was rumors that then there was rumors that the troopers were called, right? That the troopers were called in to for protection from the American flag waving people. That wasn't necessarily the truth. Must read the official statement from the troopers that the Park Service has not called them for backup. Troopers were on site at the Fairbanks Walmart parking lot where the convoy group gathered at noon on Sunday. And then Must Read Alaska's source confirms the account that the troopers were called for traffic control at the entrance to the park, because apparently they've never had 100 vehicles show up at a national park before, and they don't know how to handle it. I mean, but why were the troopers at the Fairbanks Walmart? I don't know. Were they checking for, pitchforks and torches? I have no idea. But it's insane. It's insane. People were so incensed that they created a convoy, right? It started off, Fox News Sunday carried the story. The libs of TikTok on Twitter carried the story. I mean, this made the big national headlines and everything else. And it all comes down to the superintendent of the park, Brooke Merrill. Then you get the official response. This is the official response from the Park Service. Now, I'll read it to you, and then we'll dissect it. The National Park Service statement in full reports that a National Park Service official ordered the removal of an American flag from a Denali Bridge construction worker's vehicle at Denali National Park are false. At no time did an NPS official seek to ban the American flag from the project site or associated vehicles. The NPS neither administers the bridge project contract nor has the authority to enforce terms or policies related to the contract or contractors performing the work. The American flag can be seen in various places within the park, at park facilities, campsites, on public and private vehicles, at employees' residences, and we welcome its display this Memorial Day weekend and every day. Now, you'll notice that the statement is worded pretty carefully. The order to not fly the flag was reportedly not on the job site itself. The job site is managed by the Federal Highway Administration. But when vehicles went to and from the job site on the park road, which goes through the park and the park's highway, Must Read said they verified the claim being made by construction workers who stand by their version of the events, that they were asked not to fly the flag as they drove to the construction site through the park. That's what they are stating. Not that they couldn't fly the flag at the construction site, but that they flew the... I mean, can you believe this is an actual news story? At a national park on Memorial Day, they've banned the flag. You could not... This sounds like something that came out of the Babylon Bee or the Onion. I mean, seriously. Rep. Ben Carpenter, Jamie Allard, and Kevin McCabe, all three of them are veterans, sounded off on this, and they wrote letters to Chuck Sams, the National Park Service Director for the head chief for the NPS. Allard pointed out that the men and women working in the park do not give up their First Amendment rights when they put on their helmets and go to work. McCabe wrote that Alaska boasts the highest percentage of veterans per capita of any state in the nation. These veterans, and indeed all our construction workers employed by the national parks, take immense pride in their country. The flag represents dedication, patriotism, and everything else. Ben Carpenter wrote, the facts as reported have yet to be disputed by the National Park Service, and if accurate, deeply concern me and the constituents I represent. No good justification was reported to be offered by Ms. Merrill. I mean, the complaint was that other park visitors were offended by this. Now, you'll have to remember, and I do remember some fervor about this back in the day, when this happened, when Brooke Merrills was brought in as the director of the superintendent, rather, of Denali National Park. It was a big deal. Do you remember this? Because she was the first. Was she the first woman? She was the first woman to serve as Denali Park's superintendent. And I mean, this was a big deal that she would be the park superintendent, and everything was, that was it. But I think I've discovered part of the problem here. I think I have discovered part of the issue in relation to this thing, why it's such an issue. According to the National Park Service, Merrill grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, received a master's in urban planning, and she received a master's in she's a national park, she's a superintendent, a park super. She received a master's in urban planning, a law degree from Lewis and Clark Law School. So she's a lawyer and an urban planner. Oh my God, that's just, and she's running a national park. Prior to moving to Alaska, she worked for DNA People's Legal Services on the Navajo Nation in the city of Portland, Columbia River Keepers, and Gulf Island National Seashore. So we might add, she's an urban planner and a lawyer. And then she worked for Columbia River Keepers and these environmental organizations and everything. I mean, apparently she is the poster child for all the causes du jour of social justice and everything else. No wonder she didn't like the American flag, the flag of our oppressors, right? I'm putting words in her mouth. There's no doubt about it. But the fact that she's an urban planner, and that just caught my attention. She's got a degree in urban planning and she's a lawyer and became a park superintendent because, the rat race or something. This is just, wow. There was another group that was organized from the South to meet up with the Fairbanks group. They were from Big Lake, and they rolled up to Denali about 10 a.m. So there you go. It was a big time was had by all, and the flags were flown. And if they were really hoping to keep the Karens from complaining about the flags ruining their view of all the natural beauty, if a 3-by-5 foot flag ruins your views of the enormous vista that is Denali National Park, you may need to step a little bit to the left, just about 3 feet to the left. And then your views will be unobstructed. That it's a 3-by-5 foot flag, right? It's not the size of Dodger Stadium. It's just a 3-by-5 foot flag. But I mean, can you imagine? This is what we're fighting about. I'm not saying that this is not a good fight, right? I'm not saying this is not, this is how we've gotten down into the weeds, that we're fighting about this. Is this the bread and circuses that we've been warning about? That this is the fight that's going on? What else is going on behind the scenes if this is the fight that we're having on the front of it? Right? I mean, this is This is so crazy. And the fact that somebody would complain about it taking away. If you don't like to look, it's ruining my advantage of the park. Okay. Step to the left, step to the right. Turn 180 degrees around and look at another mountain. I mean, it is the largest park in the world, in the country. Just go ahead and look anywhere else other than the truck with the flag on it as it goes by. I'm sorry, were your feelings hurt? Your feelings were hurt by all those people who died to give you the freedom to enjoy that national park. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. No. Melissa Burnett in the chat room said, I used the flag on my signs when I campaigned for school board. So much backlash. The flag really does offend people. It's astonishing. Well, then if you're offended by it, head south, head north, head east, head west. Go anywhere else. If you're offended by the flag, so be it. I mean, that's just too bad. If you are offended by, especially on Memorial Day, it's Memorial Day weekend. You're kicking off the big weekend where people celebrate and they remember people who gave their lives for this country. Though, people who gave their lives while wearing or carrying the flag. I mean, there you go. I mean, there you go. But this is what we're fighting about? I mean, has it come to this? Can you imagine in, 1939, 1940, somebody fighting about, being able to put American flag in a park, or 1950, even 1960 or 70? I mean, where have we come in the last 50 years that all of a sudden the American flag is some kind of triggering object? My God, you must not drive around town very much then, because there are American flags everywhere. And in every courthouse, and in every school, in libraries, in public buildings. How small must your life be that you're offended by the flag of your nation? Why do you even live here? You enjoy all the freedoms. You enjoy all the advantages of a country like this. Why do you even, if you're so offended by the flag of oppression, yet you're benefiting from it all, the hypocrisy of this stuff it is, it's insane. Ryan says 50 years. I'd argue 20 years declination is insane. Well, yeah, I mean, the decline in the last 20 years, it's gotten really, really rough. But yeah. There are some patriotic Americans who feel flying the flag from a vehicle is disrespectful. My parents would have objected. I don't care, but it's possible that somebody that objected on patriotic grounds. It is possible because, again, you're not supposed to make, flags into clothing. There's supposed to be some decorum for the flag. Craig Campo mentioned that they would take the flag down every day at the construction site because of the lighting issue. You're not supposed to have the flag be flying unless it's lit at night. That's flag decorum, right? That's the same reason why you're not supposed to let the flag touch the ground, right? If the flag is ratty or it's got holes or it's ragged, you're supposed to destroy it. You're supposed to burn it. You're supposed to put it in, take care of it respectfully and then burn it and then get a new flag. That you're not supposed to fly one that's, there's a whole bunch of different things for flag decorum and flag etiquette. And yes, putting them on vehicles, there are certain circumstances where it's only supposed to be done in a certain way. Does that mean I get offended if somebody's flying the flag? No. I mean, is it proper etiquette? No, but it's patriotism. I'm all about that. I'm not going to go complain to the authorities because somebody flew a flag in their truck or raised a flag over their lawn and didn't have a light on it at night. I'm not going to call the homeowners association, the HOA president, and say, they don't have a light on their flag at night. That's wrong. I I just can't with people, you know? I want somebody to say to my face that they're just offended by it. Because I just want to look at them and go, okay, you're that stupid. Have you got your plane ticket out of the country yet? You're willing to take all the advantages and all the blessings of being an American, and then you're willing to piss on them all and tell everybody else that nobody else can feel good about it because you feel this is the flag of oppression? Hey, if you're living in the oppressor's nation, baby, and you're taking advantage of all that, you are a hypocrite. But I just want to live in the... No, sorry. Out. First train for you to Venezuela. You get a first-class ticket to Venezuela if you're offended by the American flag. It's what it is. All right, we got to go. We got a line on hold. Just showed up, but I got to go. I'm up against the break. We'll be back with more here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Oh, man. I cannot believe that this is a deal. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it. At a national park on Memorial Day weekend. Well, she is an urban planner and a lawyer, so there you go. Back with more after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, I see Barbara is on the phone. Barbara will be to you here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. She probably wrote the statement from the National Park Service claiming totally false. Totally false. Are you telling me that they just made this story up? That they just was like, nobody at the park, at least say maybe it was one of our people, was overzealous in trying to protect it, but just totally false. Totally false. But this gal, I mean, I'm sure the term gal is offensive, but to somebody, but this gal, this lady, I mean, a master's in urban planning, which if you've ever talked to urban planners, city planners, they're an interesting group. I've had conversations with city planners and urban planners because they believe in the organization of society in a certain way to modify behaviors. And urban planning is, it takes a certain kind of cat to really get into urban planning. Let's just put it that way. Urban planning and a law degree from Lewis and Clark Law School in Oregon. She worked in Portland. She worked for the city of Portland. So she was apparently an attorney for the city of Portland. Columbia River Keeper, Gulf Island National Seashore. These are all, again, environmental organizations. And so could I see her asking somebody to take off the American flag? Absolutely. But I mean, wow, man. Wow. Oh, here's the other thing that kills me. This is a national park, one of the largest, this is like the place. This is all about the Pretty Rocks landslide, right? This is what kills me. Here we are. What is this? 2024. Summer access to the facilities and services in Denali are limited due to the Pretty Rocks landslide and the associated closure of the park road at mile 43. The landslide occurred between 2021 and 2022. It started in 2021. It kept happening. More and more landslides were going on. So it's been 3 years they haven't done anything. And just now you could only get in halfway, to the thing. You couldn't get to, the deeper edges of the park because But we're worried about an American flag. Get the park open. You got 100 miles of road in there. You can only go 43 miles in. And we're worried about somebody flying an American flag. Oh, I just can't with these people. I just cannot with these people. Seriously. This is what you're worried about. Okay, let me go back through the comments here. Barbara's on hold, and I got one more call after Barbara, so we'll get to there here in just a second here. Cindy said, I just passed a truck flying 2 large flags, made me feel patriotic. Good. I mean, if it made you feel sick to your stomach, then, probably the wrong show for you. Urban planning isn't a thing unless you're a civil engineer. Well, I just, again, I've talked to these planners and they worry me. The whole mindset of urban plan. I mean, I can understand laying out a city grid and making sure that your streets are not a rabbit warren and everything else and all that. But urban planners it gets deeper into that. Like they want, stacked residential housing in a specific way. They want to try and modify it's like communism. I mean, it's not communism, but in the way that they believe that they can somehow manage people better than people managing themselves. Right? That organic kind of people going where the free market wills and where their hearts will take them, and whether they want a single family home or whether they should be part of a residential block home because it's more efficient, because you can be closer to stores and footpaths and sidewalks instead of parking lots and all this kind of stuff that urban planning goes into. It's arrogant to believe that somehow you can plan the community better than the people who are living there and who could organically change it. I've always had a problem with that personally, but that's just me. That is just me. Can you imagine what would happen if you went to another country and told them their flag offended you? You'd be lucky if you just got kicked out of the country. You might end up in some jail. There was some dude crying and screaming in the parking lot as the cars were passing, though. I had to distance my child from that man-child. There's literally somebody crying in the parking lot as the people were driving with their car with their flags. Really? Why are you here? Not you, Ryan, but I mean, tell the guy, why? All right, let's get to it. Final segment here of the show. We've already got 2 lines on hold, and I can't believe that we've been talking about this for an hour almost. To me, this is just such a weird thing. And how insane is it that this is where we're at? Barbara is on the line. She's been on hold here for a few minutes, so let's get to her first and see what she has to say. And get her take on it. Barbara, what are your thoughts on all this madness? You were in the parade, I'm assuming.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I was the lead vehicle, actually.
You were the lead vehicle.
So it was a good time. We had a great time. Before we went, we made sure the story was there actually was a complaint. Chris Sullivan had, for a couple days before, asked National Park Service if this was accurate, and I don't think they planned to answer him. I think they were going to ignore him. His office still had not received a response of any substantive response from the National Park Service. I called down there to see if there was any merit or accuracy to the story. The people who answered extension 6 of the park number refused to comment, which tells me I got somebody who probably wasn't very high in the food chain, but they were very happy to direct me to how to get to the park from my location. but they wouldn't comment on the story or anything about it. Then probably at 11:15, when we were just getting everybody organized in the parking lot at Walmart, I got a call from the ADN, and they asked me, they wanted me to give some feedback, and I said, well, I haven't heard anything from the National Park Service. Have you or anybody else? Have they issued any kind of statement or anything? And they didn't have anything. Okay. So at probably about 5 to 12, I got phone calls saying, hey, they issued a statement. You don't have to go. It's like, yeah, we're going to go. It's Memorial Day weekend. We're all here. We all have flags. We're going to go down and have a good time. And after I read the statement, I'm glad we did go down because technically speaking, she may not have told the construction workers directly. She made the complaint to somebody else, and the Federal Highway Administration, who I guess has the contract, apparently told the construction workers. So it wasn't just the National Park Service. It was actually even bigger than the National Park Service, because they apparently complained to the Federal Highway Administration, who then complained to the contractor. Now, who actually drove down and told them to take it off, I have no idea. I wasn't there for the event. But I can tell you that there were quite a few people who heard about the story, more than just me, and the National Park Service had been ignoring it. I think they thought it would go away or something.
Right.
So I did call down to Healy, to a couple friends of mine that I know down there. I said, hey, is this accurate? And they said, oh, yeah, we've got flags lined up and down Stampede. And sure enough, when we went past Stampede, they did. I guess she lives down that road somewhere. I did not bother to go down Stampede. I did kind of look down. Yeah, I saw some flags down there. So apparently the people in Healy had been putting up a good show. But when we got, I was really just, I was just humbled and proud when I got down to Three Bears, because we already had a pretty good sized convoy, and there was an even bigger one at Three Bears waiting to join up with us.
Wow. What was the
reaction? We got,
what was the reaction
park
when
entrance? There was an even bigger crowd.
Oh, nice. What was the reaction when you got into the park? I mean, there was reports that the troopers were there at the entrance to the park to manage traffic, quote unquote, because apparently they can't handle 100 cars going into an alley or something. What was the reaction? Was there somebody who was terrified? Was there somebody who needed their whoopee? Was there people crying? Somebody reported that as they were leaving the Fairbanks Walmart, that there was some guy crying and pointing and having a meltdown over seeing all the flags. Was there some kind of reaction when you got to the park, Barbara?
Well, a lot of cheering. There was a guy in a gorilla suit. And there was a lot of cheering. And we went into the visitor center, drove around a little bit down Savage River Road. And, I had statements from Senator Sullivan and from Nick Baggage and a few other people that I read. And then we just dispersed and enjoyed the park with our flags.
Well, good.
I mean, it wasn't, I don't know what they expected us to do. It was Memorial Day weekend. And,
right.
Historically, I'd go down there for Memorial Day anyway.
Yeah, no, I just was wondering, were they inspecting the vehicles on the way out for pitchforks and torches? And then when you got down there, were they expecting a riot? I mean, what are you expecting from a bunch of patriotic flag waving Americans? It's
madness. Hysterical. What I thought was really amusing is that Sunday morning, somebody had sent me a screenshot. There's this thing called the Libs of TikTok, I guess, on Twitter. And somebody had sent me a screenshot that the National Park Service had asked the Alaska State Troopers for protection against the flag protesters. And I'm like, what? So you have a bunch of Alaskans going down on a Memorial Day weekend with their flags to visit the park, and you need protection from that?
Yeah.
That really made me kind of question whether that person should actually be in charge?
Yeah, no, that's a big question. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what makes her qualified to be the superintendent of the park with a degree in urban planning and a law degree. But
I think it's the word urban that bothers me.
Yeah, exactly. It's not rural planning; it's urban planning. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Barbara. Well, I appreciate you calling in. Thanks so much
We
for
had
doing that.
airplanes and everything else, so it was awesome.
Well, good. Well, I appreciate you going out there and doing that and spearheading that. I appreciate it, Barbara. Thank you so much for calling in. Barbara Haney calling from Fairbanks on that one. We got another phone call here. Let's go over here. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Well, it's Murphy from the Denali Borough area.
Hey, Murphy.
And yeah, I actually worked in the park for 12 years. I lived at Toe Flat Ranger Camp. And you have to have next to the fishing industry, working in the park is probably the most regulated job that I ever had. You have to have a special pass to get past Savage Camp, Savage checkpoint. And you have certain rules of the road that you have to follow when you get to the Teclanica Bridge. But we always flew the flag proudly at Toe Flat Ranger Camp. And I'm the daughter of a vet and the wife of a vet. And I was pretty offended to hear that somebody was told they couldn't fly the flag in the park.
Right.
And I can see why there's such a controversy. Was it an American citizen that complained, or was it, tourists from a different country? And then the other issue is they do have a thing about interfering with the park experience, and that's why they have so many rules and regulations. You have to stop for the buses and wait for them to get past you and all kinds of stuff. When you're driving into the park with your special permit, you're not allowed to get off and hike around or anything. You're just allowed to drive to your workstation area, stay in your housing for the days that you are working, and then drive back out.
Right.
So I will listen to what else you have to say.
All right. Well, thank you, Murph. I appreciate you calling in and being part of it. Thank you very much. I want to clarify Ryan's statement. He said the guy who was yelling and crying was actually at the park. He said, yes, the Park Service was recording, and that guy went to him yelling and whining. An adult man-child had to be in his 50s who was up there whining and yelling about the thing. It was at the park. He said he was waiting at the visitor center. Barbara had passed, and she was in the lead shortly after a ranger came out to record on his phone. Well, good. I mean, I hope the ranger posted all that up on Facebook. I hope he posted it up on social medias. I mean, that's the good stuff. I don't think probably everybody at the park feels that way. But somebody had to have enough horsepower to go to the Federal Highway Administration and make them take those down to begin with. I mean, this is America 2024. We're going to fight about whether or not we can fly our own flag in a national park as a patriotic statement. Doomed. All right, tomorrow's another day. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show. It's just stupid, man. I mean, what? All right. Well, there you go. I'm done with today. I'm done. Brian, yeah. The urban planners, control freaks. You will live how we tell you and you will like it. That's exactly kind of encapsulates the whole feeling that I get from this central planner kind of thing. It's insane. This is insane. I mean, again, I just kind of want to know how her background made her qualified to be superintendent of a park. I don't know the history. Maybe she's got years of intervening experience that I don't know about, but all right. Well, I'm done. Gotta go. We'll see you tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Dukes Show.